I mean, you must have been terribly upset to see the building sold off by these foolish people.
Oh, absolutely. I think. I mean, I think it's no, it's a real modern day tragedy for this organisation, and that someone would, as it were, simply grab it and then turn around what its founding principles are, and to think that they're going to that somehow it's going to be some rejuvenated, more forward-looking something, which it ain't, and then to mortgage the building with no, as it were, historical right feels appalling.
Greetings and welcome back to the Actor at the Centre YouTube channel. I'm Harry Burton. I'm one of the directors of the New Actors Centre, which is the practical wing of the 4-year campaign which we called Actor at the Centre, which was set up to try to restore and reinstate continuous affordable training, which is what the Actors Centre stood for 40 years at its building 1A Tower Street, until Seven Dials Playhouse came along and closed it down, sold the building, cancelled the workshops, cancelled the membership, all with no consultation. But that's another story. The point about the New Actors Centre is that we have decided to try and put it back into circulation. So this week, it's a very exciting week here in London. It's January the 13th today, 2026. And tomorrow at 11 o'clock at the Marylebone Theatre, we are launching our 9-week pilot programme of affordable training, workshops, classes. We've got some fantastic practitioners, 2 tutors, facilitators, wonderful people with wonderful experience, a broad range of classes, and we have a launch tomorrow morning in the presence of Dame Sheila Hancock. Sheila Hancock was one of the original founders, along with Tony Hopkins and Clive Swift and others, one of the original founders of the Actors Centre, and it really must have been incredibly distressing for some of those founders to witness the demolition of their project. The building at 1A Tower Street, I never cease to share this because it's simply mind-blowing what's happened. But that building was bought by Equity and Tony Hopkins and had a 999-year lease on it, and the rent paid by the Actors Centre charity was 1 peppercorn per year. That is how dedicated the idea of the Actors Centre was. It was meant to last for 1,000 years, unlike some other projects which were meant to last for 1,000 years. But there we are. We live in strange times. So tomorrow at the Marylebone Theatre, we are raising the flag for continuous affordable actor training, and I hope to see some of you there. The person you've just seen a little clip of is Mark Wing-Davey, me chatting to him yesterday, and I'm now going to roll the whole interview that I did with Mark. This is the second in a kind of series that I'm doing of podcast, videocast, vlogging type material, just to try and get people interested in the history of the Actors Centre and what it stands for and who some of the people are. Because Mark was the original artistic director of the Actors Centre back in the 90s. He was really running it at its heyday, and was then followed by Matthew Lloyd, who also was very successful. And Mark Wing-Davey then went on to run the graduate acting programme at the Tisch, New York University, and he's still a professor there, and still carries on his very interesting independent directing career in the meanwhile. He was most famous, of course, as the two-headed Beeble Brox, or whatever his name was, in The Hitchhiker's Guide. I've got that wrong, but somebody will correct me. So I hope you enjoy this interview with Mark, and I will see some of you tomorrow at the New Actors Centre, Marylebone Theatre. And if you're watching this and you want to support us, please use the link at the end to buy a membership. You can donate a membership, you can buy it for somebody else, or you can buy it for yourself and come along and do some classes. Thank you so much for watching, and Happy New Year. Mark, it's always, I don't want to embarrass you, but it's always a treat for me to speak to you and to see you, because we do go back quite a long way, 1983.
Oh, is that right? You've kept score.
No, I haven't kept score. I've just I went to the Central School between 82 and 85. So if it was I think we did. Well, I know it was The Winter's Tale, which you directed. but it was probably a second year show, and therefore my second year was 83, 84. So that's the only reason. I haven't kept score, but
don't
meeting.
remember. I remember that production only because I remember wrestling with, well, what is this statue business? How can we make that really live? And then getting all the other actors to be statues while the audience came in. I mean, a nightmarish thing. I think you could do it at drama school, but not anywhere else. And it was, and then covering them with cloths, and then eventually so that all statues look like living human beings. But funny enough, I did it relatively recently, I don't know, a few years ago here at Grad Acting, and I still was wrestling with that thing. And then I decided that what was interesting now about the statue was not that it was lifelike, but really the response of the other characters to the idea of this thing coming to life. And so I kind of made it into a kind of video installation where, Paulina had kept the clothes from the original thing, and we knew that she was alive, and they kind of then dressed her up as we saw Leontes come in. It was fun. And another sign of the time. So back in the day, I don't know if you remember, luckily because of your educational upbringing, you had a particularly posh accent, which was good. And then the young lady playing Perdita was from the north. And even though it says in the script, she's got a marvelous accent, I loved the combination of her being like that, and all that stuff. But of course, in the States, it's a bit more difficult. It's a bit nowadays. It's with accents and what they mean. And so what I thought, where am I going to set the shepherds? How are we going to do that without? Because I can't go down into the Appalachians. That's not going to work. There's all that stuff. The South. Whoa, crikey, careful. So I decided to make them Australian, and that was marvelous. It was great. So you had Perdita who spoke like that a bit, and anyway, so it was fun.
So they were sort of buckaroos.
Exactly, but it was kind of quasi-modern dress. It was all done with these enormous kind of milk vats, which were used as seating things. It was great. It was fun to do. And the son, Mamilius, was a kind of video nerd, and so I had him kind of with a live video camera, and then I took a kind of idea out of a myth about Diane Arbor, so I had him film his own suicide, so that was part of it, and it was all that stuff.
Wow.
Time moves on.
I wish I'd seen. I'm just going to share for the general consumption that you have taught and lectured all over the world, Yale, Columbia, Princeton. But you started life as an actor, and but not only did you direct some of us at Central, you then became the head of acting, or the principal.
No, not the principal.
Not the principal.
Basically, for a brief period, my tenure, they decided to change the nomenclature of the head of acting to artistic director at Central. And so I was the artistic director at that time, became the artistic director, which was effectively the head of acting, which was taking over from George Hall, Tony Falking, and people like that.
Right. And I think it was 2008 you became the chair of the acting program at the graduate acting program at
I did. That's exactly right.
At NYU. And
yes.
you're now I'm going to say emeritus figure at.
I'm not an emeritus figure. I'm simply a professor, an arts professor there,
Right.
but which is great. I love it. So what it means is that I don't do any of the admin work. I just concentrate on the stuff that I'm on directing there and teaching there, and I still have, a smattering of a career in New York too.
Right.
So I just did a show at La Mama just earlier this year.
And you're in rehearsal now.
I'm in rehearsal for a piece called Project, which is based on the movies of Pedro Almodovar and Louis Buñuel.
Oh, wow.
Which happens it's like an intellectual version of Alan Ayckbourn. It happens in two spaces at once, two audiences, and then they have to swap over halfway through, but then the actors repeat that piece.
But that's with grad acting.
It is with grad acting. Yeah.
Okay. So I didn't know this, but you went to Cambridge and did an MA. What did you study when you decided to do an MA?
I studied English.
Oh, okay.
No. Okay, no. But one of the iniquities of Oxford and Cambridge is, I think, is that after you've graduated for I don't know, 4 years. I don't know what the figure is. You get an MA by default. You don't do anything for it. And so it just so happened that, in fact, I got a BA at Cambridge in English back in 1970. But then it was hippie time, in those days, and I had a bar bill. So they said, we're not going to give you your degree until you paid your bill. And so I think my mother did pay my bill, but then when I got appointed at Central, and I put down I was a BA, and I thought I better check up with my college. I rang them up and said, have I got this BA? And they said, no, you haven't. You didn't pick it up. So they said you can do it by proxy, which in fact I did. And then later, my two daughters were at Cambridge, turned out, luckily, one at King's and one at Robinson. And I thought, I'm being courted a little bit by American institutions. Why don't I pick up my MA, if I can, in person? And so in fact I did, and they were there. It's kind of weird, So anyway, so that's the MA story.
So what I suppose what I was probing at was how this journey from, because you were a jobbing actor and you were a director, clearly in really relishing the chance to work with younger people.
Sure.
I mean, you weren't. This is 40 years ago, but you were not old by any stretch of the imagination yourself. No. But you clearly relished that. But how did you really find yourself becoming an educator, a full-time educator?
I'll tell you exactly. So my late wife, Anita Carey, and in fact my late partner, we met in Rep at Sheffield, and we only got married relatively recently because I was being sought after slightly by American institutions, and so it was thought, that would be a good idea to do, just in case for green card and that sort of thing. So what happened is, as you say, I had a reasonable career. I was in TV and the National and all that stuff, and I was a bit of a curmudgeon. I'd come back and I'd go, that's fucking director, doesn't understand, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. And she went to Central and she said to me, stop complaining. Why don't you put your money where your mouth is? Go and talk to George Hall and ask if you can work with some students. And, maybe you see whether you can actually do anything. Anyway, so effectively that began. And it turned out that I was okay at it. And so I was a freelancer working at Central and Guildhall and other places. Occasionally I'd come into, I remember helping John Harding and John Burroughs with Peter Skellern at the Court. I would come in as a kind of fixer there. And so that's kind of when I began directing, really was more at Central over a course of years, where I was still acting, but that, as it were, was my side hustle. So then I was then approached to apply for the job, and that then led on. And then because within that job, I had a bit of a fight with the administration of Central then, because it was all about dressing things up as important, where really there were cuts. That was the problem. So then what the last thing that I did was a piece which I asked Carol Churchill, who'd been a friend of mine since joint stock days, to go and do a workshop in Romania about the Romanian Revolution, because I was very conscious that the people I was teaching, the students I was teaching, that their sense of being on the front line was really psychological. It was like divorce, the things that happen to people, or it was not to minimize these things. There's self-harm, often psychological stuff. They weren't on, as it were, a front line of a revolution, but the people in Bucharest, it felt like from where we were, they were on the front line, and they were the same age as these undergraduates. They weren't even undergraduates then; they were just students. And so then I approached Carol, who initially said no, but then an hour later said yes, if we can get clean money. I remember her saying, and that meant money which was not sponsorship by something, but came from a more a source with slightly more probity. And so then what happened is that we managed to get some money together from, I think, Camden Council, and then Carol and I went out to Bucharest and met with this major drama school in Bucharest, and then went out with 11 students, I think, about 2 or 3 weeks later, and did a workshop for maybe 10 days, and that became a play called Mad Forest. And that play about the Romanian Revolution. Because then I was leaving, Carol and I then rented the central studio, the thing where the thing was, for an extra 6 weeks, and then Carol worked the box office, and that meant we got reviews, national reviews, and that then meant that the Royal Court wanted us to go there, and then Andrei Shaban and the National Theatre in Romania wanted us to go. So then we went to Romania 9 months later, 9 months after the revolution, and then we came back and we played at the Royal Court downstairs. And then Joe Papp rang me to say, would I go to the Public Theatre? By then the students had left, and I said to them, look, would you like to go to America? And they said, would we still be called students? Because, you know, and I said, you'd have to for the visa. And they said, no, we don't want to go. So then I then said, okay, fine. And then New York Theatre Workshop rang up and said, okay, can you come? A different organisation. So then I went out to New York and then got people just out of drama school, out of Yale, NYU, and Juilliard, and I think Rutgers too, with people like Callista Flockhart and Garrett Dillahunt and Paris. But anyway, it was a downtown success, and that bounced me into an American directing career.
It almost feels like you're just being yanked forward by some sort of, you know,
sure,
genie that knows your. I mean, one of my favourite books is a book called The Soul's Code by James Hillman. He talks about this idea of the daemon, you know, the idea that there's a spirit that comes with us that knows better than we do what our fate is, and it yanks you sort of through all the resistance that you might throw up into what you're meant to be doing. It almost sounds like that.
Well, certainly I was a straw for every wind that blew in that sense. I didn't have a sense of career, but I did have a curiosity and a sense of being interested in what I was doing. Right. And then as part of that American thing, what then happened was a parallel thing to what had happened before with me in Central, was that I would be employed particularly I would have outside, I did an Angels in America in San Francisco and all that stuff, relatively, and I did 2 Shakespeares in Central Park. But I also was employed by grad acting at NYU from time to time as a visiting professor or something. So I'd done various productions there. And so that then meant that when they were looking for a new chair, I was headhunted and asked to apply. And so that is how it then worked out.
Amazing. Because I don't know anything about your dad, but I know that your mum was a treasured actress, Anna Wing, who was a national treasure, really.
Yes, yeah, she was trouble. She was difficult.
But I always remember
my father was an actor.
Yeah, he was. I remember you in was it Richard Eyre's Tumbledown? You appeared in uniform.
I did.
And I remember thinking, Mark looks incredibly good in uniform, and he must have army ancestors.
I'm not sure. Well, he was in the Merchant Navy. My father was an actor called Peter Davey, and bizarrely, Sheila Hancock worked with him. I remember meeting Sheila in like Provence or somewhere, and her saying, "I think I worked with your father." Well, mostly people would say, "I worked with your mum," you know, because she had a long career. Wow. But Tumbledown. So I did Tumbledown, which I enjoyed. There was some stories attached to it. But then I did. I think the first movie by I'm going to get the name wrong now, by Paul, the guy who did all the Bourne movies, the later Bourne movies.
Paul Greengrass,
Paul Greengrass, yeah. So his first movie with David Thewlis and things. Anyway, and I was playing an army officer, and it was set in the Falklands, and I go on to get my costume, and what I find is I've got the costume from Tumbledown. And I realised that you could have been cast by someone going through the costume rack and going, "Oh, let's get that actor, Mark Wing-Davey, and we know he'll fit into the costume." Anyway, so I also was in that Falklands movie too.
But you didn't go to drama school. You didn't do training.
No, and ironically, the training that I had, as it were, the theoretical training, was really developed through doing that work at Central. So, in other words, the stuff that I did, because the faculty there, the staff there were marvelous, and one had these kind of critical sessions about productions and things like that, that they were very perspicacious, the values were clear. David Terrence became a close friend of mine, and they were passionate about what acting was and what was good and bad, etc. And so that, I feel, was really the kind of, over about 17 years, that was kind of like the groundwork of what I thought about what actor training might be. I mean, in the way that what you do as a director is it's a magpie profession. You know, you cull from things that you've seen and what as an actor, you know, Bill Gaskell, for instance, who was mean as anything but a wonderful director. So there are certain approaches to work which one likes as an actor.
But, did you find that as an actor who hadn't been to drama school, did you feel at a disadvantage, or?
I think I did feel at a disadvantage up to a point. I mean, it was tricky because when I was still at school, a bit of a kind of nepo baby, I remember being in a play with John Arden and Margaretta Darcy, and third year students from Lambda, which was like Maureen Lipman and Leslie Joseph and Philip Sayre. I remember them still, and they were all kind of nimini pimini, all that stuff, and I felt, oh no, this is not for me. So they completely put me off the idea of going to drama school. And so then, when I was at Cambridge, I did a thing called the Oxford and Cambridge Shakespeare Company, and was directed by Richard Cottrell and Jonathan Miller. And I would ask them as well whether they thought I should go, and they in fact spoke against it. But later on, I think maybe I would have enjoyed that struggle and that abandonment of trying always to succeed. I think that the freedom to fail is a great cradle, really, within drama school.
Yes, it's a good actor's training has a sort of womb-like period where
yes, that's right.
Where you're in the amniotic fluid of protected space.
Yeah, but also you're seeing other people who are not striving, where you can see them and admire them without feeling threatened by them in an ideal world, rather than being in a kind of hybrid situation where you'd still admire those actors with whom you're performing, but at the same time you've still got to get on with your job in a way. So I had kind of. It wasn't that I mourned not going, but running a program, I thought, I'd quite like to have done that program myself.
What? We ought to. You've mentioned Sheila, and the fact of the matter is that on Wednesday next week, I will be chatting to her in front of 50 or 60 people, because it is this week that we launch the 9-week taster pilot program of a new Actors Centre. Sheila, of course, was a founding mother figure of the original Actors Centre, along with Anthony Hopkins and others. So that's it's really great. And one of the connecting threads is that you were the first artistic director of the Actors Centre in London.
I suppose I was. I think maybe I don't know if they invented that title then.
I think the title came along because I'm assuming that was part of the 1A Tower Street story that Hopkins and Equity bought this building just off Cambridge Circus, which was given to the Actors Centre and became the home. And once there was a building, there needed to be someone in charge of it, someone to run it.
That's right.
But that immediately catapults you into a dynamic leadership role, And I know that it was a very important thing for you to have a team around you, because in those days there was an incredible fundraising project on an annual basis to raise the money that made the classes and workshops affordable, which was the point, wasn't it? The point of the Actors Centre was affordability, so that there was a year-round continuous program of training and workshops, which any actor who became a member could then, really well under. I mean, nowadays, of course, there's an incredible market in workshops and so forth. Not least, I think, in London, because the Actors Centre was lost. Now, we won't go into how or why it was lost now, but
No, I remember when I first took over, reducing the cost of the membership, saying I think it should be £20 rather than 40. I think it was, because I think it should be just one bill that you can kind of go, okay, I'm gonna become a member. Bang, here's the cash. Right. And I don't know. We didn't do a survey about whether that reduced the membership or increased it or whatever. But I did a really marvelous team around me. So there was a programmer for the Tristan Bates. There was someone who dealt specifically with the way that the brochure would be kind of constructed, and there was also someone who dealt with the general manager, who dealt with the kind of day-to-day running of it. But it very much was still within that model of artistic direction in that kind of pyramid shape, and it may be that models have shifted since then.
Well, that's one thing we're about to find out. I mean, at the moment, the campaign group Actor at the Centre, which is now kind of styling itself the New Actors Centre, we're very hopeful that the 9-week programme will be successful enough for Marylebone Theatre to want to talk about a much longer term arrangement, because it's a wonderful building. They love the idea of being a kind of hub. What the Actors Centre at Tower Street was at its best was a home from home for actors. It was a place where there was a little library. You could go and sit, read a book, have a cup of tea, or have a chat, or do any number of workshops, classes, and so forth. But
yes, I remember one of the things, of course, that we did in that time was to rejuvenate, as it were, the restaurant and put a kind of ramp in, and I remember having, to not drop a name, having lunch with Alan Bates, and who was the patron then, and we had this magnificent Portuguese chef who would cook up these lunches, and they were not subsidised, but they were relatively cost effective. And I remember him saying, God, this food is marvellous, as well. So it was partly trying to have a social place, and somewhere which was kind of affordable for actors to gather and to socialise, but without being to have a kind of a pressure to achieve or anything like that. But I think it's a difficult thing to do, because I think it needs this mix of the kind of pragmatic, the commercial, and for my money, the utopian. And to find that balance, I think, is very. It will be even more difficult in the current climate.
Yeah, and the fortunes of the Actors Centre always kind of went up and down. Membership, I believe, at one point was around 5,000, which is staggering, really, to think of that.
Well, that would have been after my time, because I think the membership around mine was about 2,500, maybe. I can't remember.
But this utopian angle is very interesting, because at the moment we are essentially a volunteer group. We are leaderless. We don't have and perhaps there's much less need for a figurehead, practically or symbolically, when you're not actually running a building, because we won't be running that building. So perhaps the utopianism of not having a leader is not quite as silly as it sounds.
I mean, I think it's worth having. I'm sure you're having these conversations about how one configures the New Actors Centre in relation to a longer view rather than a short-term view, but while you still acknowledge those short-term desires that people have to get a fix and to do something about their career or whatever it was. And I was thinking about this actually before this conversation a bit, and a bit of me wondered whether there could be approaches which are where there's a conversation about, well, what would a training look like in in the late 2020s, and is it something where you could have you could have a tick box approach where you'd say, well, if you're doing X number of classes and then you did these classes and then you would get a taster class for this one, which you would not necessarily want to pay for, so that there would be structures which would encourage you to either, as it were, fill in a kind of the equivalent of a semester over a whole year, but just like, so you'd say, well, I can only work at night, so therefore I'll take this one, to encourage something which is beyond the immediate fix, just because I think that sometimes I'm sure an immediate fix works and you get the job or you get the interview and everything shifts. But I think because I've seen how people develop over periods of time within drama programs, how do you do it where people are financially disadvantaged, and how do you maintain something where you are nurturing people into a future, particularly a future where the theatre itself is more precarious than it has been.
Not half.
Yeah.
I mean, at the moment, with our program, somebody could do that over 9 weeks. They could take a movement class, a voice class. They could take an improv class, a Meisner class, a Shakespeare class, an Ayckbourn class, a Pinter class. I mean, it really does kind of have the lovely sort of sense of a broad education. I don't know really what's radical or not in terms of drama schools, except that what one does hear is that craft has been relegated somewhat from the era that when you and I met, and subsequent eras, that craft is slipping through the cracks.
Yes, I mean, it's also, I think, that one of the virtues of a drama school is that you're working within a cohort structure. And the difficulty about kind of individual training like that is that the cohort notion is nebulous, and with any luck, that kind of social cohort can feel like something. But also, I think that the other thing that the Actors Centre had, which was tricky, was that it often felt quite kind of the white middle class, and I think that one wants to make sure that the the Danny Sopanis of this world come in from time to time as well, and engage with a larger idea of who's going to be acting. Certainly at grad acting here in New York, many of our non-white students seem to do a lot better, bizarrely, having come through the kind of grad acting program. If we looked at their desirability within the larger industry, so I think that there definitely is a need for greater diversification within both the teachers and within the students.
Well, I think there's been a substantial, if not the beginnings of, if not a sustainable one, there's been a considerable adjustment in the last 5 to 10 years that I've seen, which was long overdue, and which we want to reflect, obviously, and it's all to the good. What's happening in New York with amplification and microphones for actors? Because there's quite a serious trend in London where actors more and more are being mic'd, whether they like it or not.
Well, funny enough, the last show that I did at La Mama, which in this case was a great big space, they said to me, "Do you want mics?" Which would have been a budgetary consideration. And the last show that I'd seen there, the actors had mics, and I'm slightly. And I said no. I said, look, we've got actors who are well trained. We've got a set which is movable, but which has reflective surfaces within it, so that the actors themselves can feel whether or not they're hitting the back row. And so we didn't use mics, and we didn't get. We got the occasional complaint, but very rarely, like 0.1%. So so I'm in favour of actors not using mics, partly because I think that within reason. I mean, I think if you're playing in a 400 seat theatre, then that seems to me you shouldn't need a mic. But if you're playing in a 2,000 seat theatre, then maybe there need to be float mics or something. Partly because I think that it's interesting when you see actors working with mics, and I've worked with that. I did at Shakespeare in the Park. They have mics, you see. But when you see actors do that, they slightly go on the back foot, and they think that it's just all about, as it were, the intimate relationship that they're showing to the other actor. But they don't have a kind of energy and in their voice. And it's interesting how occasionally you see a show and suddenly the mics stop working, and then the word gets to the actors, and suddenly they are projecting, but also their energy and the amount that they want to communicate to the other actor. Suddenly the dial turns up by about 15%. And for the audience, they also sit forward, and not to strain to hear, because they in fact they can hear, but I like that sense of, we're trying to play an intimate scene here, but we've got to hit the back wall of the gods or whatever it is. And so, but you know, I come from the touring days and all that kind of stuff, where there weren't mics in those largest theatres. But I think that it's worth. Tony Hopkins was talking about that, and various other friends of mine talk about it, where they say, look, they're doing movies and they can hardly hear the other actor who they're having a scene with, and sometimes I think that you lose expression. That's my point. That you lose expression in the voice if you're always talking sotto voce. You're always talking quietly. You don't have that kind of range of. You're missing some tools, some craft, effectively. So I'm in favour of restricting, at least working, being able to think I'm able to, and also it doesn't cost you anything. I'm all for actors being able to speak clearly, even intimately, and still hit the back wall of the house, or hit or in the round, or whatever the configuration is.
Absolutely. I think it's profoundly regrettable that we say these things and somehow have to apologise for being old-fashioned. I mean, if the internet breaks and suddenly we're not all online, we're going to have to suddenly relearn an awful lot of things that we've thrown out. And usually when these things culturally get thrown out, they always need to be brought back at some point.
So yes. Well, we'll get the Stone Age axes out as well, won't we?
But I remember doing a class with you at the Actors Centre that was something that was really felt radical at the time, and I've never forgotten, even though it's 30 years ago or so. And that was to do with a kind of action-based exercise that was set to music of some quite a.
I do that at NYU, and it's developed, funny enough, since then. Yeah, I do that same exercise.
Where did that come from? I mean, just tell us just outline the exercise and then tell us what.
Well, the exercise, the class, as it were, is called the choreography of everyday life, and basically, it's you take an everyday activity, and in back in the day with the Actors Centre, it was done to a difficult piece of modern music. In that case, it was Bartók String Quartet number 4, yes. And 90-second segments of it. But you had to have, whatever it was, the real things. Let's say you were making a salad. You had to do it with real salad leaves and olive oil and balsamic vinegar or whatever it was. And so you had to. That's what you had to do.
I was chopping an onion. I was coming back.
That's right. Well, at NYU now we use Bartók, that same Bartók. We also use there's a black composer called George Walker, who's also very difficult to quite. And funny enough, I was listening to Radio 3, and I think I heard his son, I think he was a clarinetist, refer back to his father who wrote string quartets. Anyway, because previously, in order to expand the thing, I'd done it with, Ornette Coleman and other jazz musicians, but it was kind of apples and oranges. But then when I found George Walker, it then became apples and apples, and that was great. And so, but what's happened to it, and I can tell you where it came from. So it came from when I worked with Anna Deavere Smith. I was kind of headhunted. I was director hunted. I was flavour of the month then.
Say it again. I didn't catch it. Something Smith?
Anna Devere Smith, who is a well-known actor, originator of a form with stuff to be done with headphones in your ear, and verbatim theatre stuff. And I took some of that verbatim theatre stuff and then adapted it a bit, and then we used that at the Actors Centre. But as part of it, I wanted to do something else which was syncing with music rather than syncing with speech. And so I then kind of, that exercise developed in its embryonic form began then, just at the Actors Centre actually, after that workshop that I'd done back in the day. And so then I kept that with me as part of what I brought in to NYU. And funny enough, I've just finished it. And often in New York, I'll get, I don't know, old friends of mine, the kind of Alan Cox and Brian Coxes and Tim Pickett-Smith, British Soul, those people, to come in and see it, And it's a kind of, it's an interesting exercise because for these young actors, they have to do it. You do it with your headphones in, so that the audience just see your activity and they need to know whether they can believe it or not. They shouldn't be seeing the triggers. So they do their, making a cocktail and all that difficult stuff. I also do it occasionally with professional classes. Then the audience then see it with the music out loud, and they see it's repeated, and then you see, oh, that's how it works.
So the action is devised and shaped to the dynamics of the music.
Completely, that's right.
Yes.
And so I was working with an actor who just died recently called Isaiah Whitlock Jr. And quite a lot of the play that I was doing had kind of very precise things to music. So as an intro, we used the Bartok exercise with the cast, and he was just marvelous at it. And what he did is he began it, and then towards the end, he then developed a storyline within that little 90-second exercise, and so that shifted the way that the exercise worked. And this year, funnily enough, the cohort developed an idea that they were all, I don't know, going to a wedding, and that some of them were envious of it, and so even though they were still doing their everyday activity, there was a kind of thrust, a kind of plot thrust that they had invented themselves. So so that's the choreography of everyday life.
And what you're really encouraging people is to, well, I don't know how to say it.
I'll give you the pedagogic.
Yes,
thing,
please.
Which is look, as an actor, you're going to be asked to do difficult things technically. So someone might say, go down there, look left, look right, go down, turn left, and then can you just stop briefly? Your job is not to go, well, why am I doing that? Your job is to make up why you're doing it and to do it so we believe it. So it's basically just to give you an overload of technical demands, which are to do this thing believably, so that you won't be intimidated by anyone when you've left saying, can you do X, Y, Z, or whatever it may be, at the same time as this. So because you'll have done this incredibly hard exercise where it's 90 seconds with all the vagaries of real things, so that if you're grinding coffee, so often I'll get them to put like a mistake or an accident, in quotes, into it, so that they can accommodate that within what it is that they're doing. So it's really about technical preparedness and not being intimidated by anything that anyone will throw at you on a movie or something like that.
That's great, because then having crossed that threshold, the body retains the whole journey from but this is insane, I can't possibly, to bloody hell, I've done it. And
it's also
I've loved it. I've loved doing it.
The virtue of like a 3-year program is that you can do some of these utopian things where you will never get to spend that amount of time on 90 seconds of action in your life. You won't do that again, but you'll have spent, however many hours it is, maybe 200, 300 hours working on 90 seconds. Well, that's quite a lot.
So in the end, I mean, what I remember from working with you as a director was what enormous fun you generated in the kind of just the esprit de corps and the sense of the collective
Hmm.
purpose behind the work. Um, and I'm assuming that somebody must have modelled that for you. Where did you pick up the idea that it had better be fun, or people can quite quickly get jaded?
Well, I suppose I don't know. I mean, my own natural competitiveness. I like I used to like team things, and I'm so. I mean, I remember. How can I tell the story without being slanderous? Okay, I remember. No, I was going to go and do a workshop for a period of time, and I bumped into an actor who had done this same workshop without me in another city, not in New York. And I said, "Oh, how was it?" And they said, "Oh, it's good. It was good. It was good." You know, they were very professional about it. Then I said, "But on a scale of horribleness from 1 to 11." So anyway, so part of what I'm interested in is how to make the company, the actors themselves, feel good about themselves, and not to feel and for hierarchies to be dismantled. I suppose working with Richard Wilson, I mean, I didn't. Anita, my wife, worked with him on a piece called Other Worlds by Robert Holman at the Court. Well, he did things with beanbags. Alan Rickman was the assistant for that. And where they'd throw beanbags, and for a while I did that too. But then I got fed up with it. But that was a good idea, where you do something which was about contacting other people, etc., etc. And so I invented. There's a game called Koosh that I then invented with the people in Angels in America when I did it in San Francisco, and that is what I use partly as a kind of cohort building exercise, where hierarchies are taken away in order to play this very simple game, but equally it's a game which is supportive of others. And so, and I think it's important to have various strands to the rehearsal day, some of which can break the either can break the headiness of it all, or can break the kind of tension if you're in a kind of emotional relationship with another actor or in a scene, or where you don't want to, you've got to open the windows somehow within the process. I think in a way which lets everyone breathe and like each other, or even pretend to like each other.
But you've also mentioned names like Bill Gaskill, who was
Sure.
famously. I mean, I remember auditioning for him, and
Sure.
it was like it was the end of the world.
I mean, I adored Bill, but because
But I don't mean him particularly. I just mean that thing of
he was
people.
horrible.
Yes.
And I worked with who else was horrible? Oh God, I did a piece with Kevin McNally called Wildfire in the West End, and Dinah Rigg, and but he was known to be a monster. He was like a northern, he was like this, don't do that shit kicking acting. Go on. Anyway, he was terribly good. But Kevin and I, for instance, we bonded together over that, where he'd begin to get kind of mean, and we'd go, "I've heard about this, haven't you? This is where he gets really hard and mean to the other actors." And so we had a kind of bantering relationship with that stuff. So I don't mind a bit of lemon-lipped versions of how people directed. They're not trying to, certainly with Bill Gaskill, they're wanting the better project, but he was. But a lot of my Bill Gaskill tales are about him being mean, and then someone eventually one-upping him 2 days later. Marjorie Yates, for instance. Maybe he was. For me, I didn't find him. I found him frustrating and annoying, but at the same time, I valued he had incredibly good taste, incredible taste. Where he'd go, or someone would say, "When do I change character?" And he'd suddenly say, "You're the actor, make that choice," or whatever it was. So he anyway, it was fun. It was fun working with those guys.
As a director, if you give it out, you've got to be able to take some of it on.
I think you do. That's right. I mean, I say that to my students. I say, look, you don't have to respect me. I don't care. I don't mind if you don't respect me. And if you want to imitate my accent, do it. But just make sure it's a good imitation.
Well, Mark, to me, you are inimitable. You are one of a kind. I think we should hit it and quit it there. Call it a day.
Yeah.
But it's been rich to chat with you about this. I know for the listener and the viewer, Mark has been a somewhat distant by circumstance, but incredibly present supporter of the idea of reviving. I mean, you must have been terribly upset to see the building sold off by these foolish people.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's it's a real modern day tragedy for this organization, and that someone would, as it were, simply grab it and then turn around what its founding principles are, and to think that that somehow it's going to be some rejuvenated, more forward-looking something, which it ain't, and then to mortgage the building with no, as it were, historical right feels appalling.
Yeah, it's been a grim time, but you've been very, very supportive and positive in our efforts to try to pull out of the wreckage the nugget of.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited about the future of the new Actors Centre, and if I can lend my shoulder to the wheel, I will.
Bless you. All right. Thank you so much. Lots of love. Hope to see you soon.
Of course, Harry.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you,
Bye.
Mark.